Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss our favorite snowy areas in video games. It is currently winter. As of recording, it is December 5th, year of our Bayonetta 2025, and I live in Michigan. And last week is when the snow really hit. That's when it finally started, right around Thanksgiving. It finally hit. And it was like, okay, we're back at it. You know, one of the greatest things in Michigan, if you're not from the area, is that every year there's people that don't know how to drive. Every single year. It does not matter. The instant there is a hint of snow, a centimeter of that white powder you cannot sniff, people are crashing. I drove past an accident like the first night it was snowing. I was like, oh, there's one already. It's guaranteed. I've had my moments. You know, I've never crashed or anything like that because of the snow, but I've had some moments. I've done some spins. I almost ended up in the middle of a freeway one time where, you know, you have like that little, or interstate, if you will, but where it has like the grass in the middle, and that's like the big divide, and you see cars down there. If you're not familiar with snow, then you just look that up. I almost ended up down there, leaving work, and the worst time that could ever happen. It's like the worst feeling in the world. I just left work, and then something happens that, you know, you have a car accident. You know how it is. Like, it can be any weather, and then poof, you know, tire blows out, something crazy. It was one of those. It was almost one of those. Hit a little patch of ice. The rest of the road was clear. It was one of those clear moments, but there was just a little patch of ice. It was close to the edge. Started, you know, wavering a little bit, slipping and sliding. Back of my car slipped entirely, and it was down. And I slammed on the gas, and I evened it out, and I was just sliding. And then I got some traction, shot back up on the road, and I was on my way. Made it home. Everything was good, because I was like, the last thing on earth I want right now is to leave work and then be stuck in the middle of the thing, because no one ever escapes. You see people in there all the time. Like they try to, you know, that's the only time people ever pay attention to physics, is when they're trying to get out of that little ditch in the middle of the road. When there's snow, that's the only time people utilize physics in real life. But anyway, we're here to talk about games. The weather has been happening, and it was like, you know what? I need a new topic. Haven't done one of these in a hot minute, so, you know, if you catching this one, check out some of the stuff I've been posting on the channel recently. I've been, you know, putting some of the newer type of content out, so check that stuff out. Recently put up a wallpaper, a moving wallpaper. I say wallpaper if you aren't familiar with the channel. I do live wallpapers utilizing virtual photography, so check some of those out. It's mostly Ghost tape right now, if I'm being totally honest, but there will be other stuff coming up soon. But anyway, there are, you know, snowy levels in games in general, like just across space and time. There are some games where it's just like the whole thing is kind of snow, pretty much. So of course I wanted to bring that up, and obviously as I get into my, you know, my little list that I have in my head, I would love to know like some of your favorite areas, just some of the most memorable moments, memorable either levels or just areas in general. Like I said, there are like whole games that pop up. I just want to talk about those. So like some of your favorites that just pop up when you think of snowy levels in games, or snowy areas even. I would love to know yours. So definitely put them down in the comments below. But kicking things off, I'm gonna go with the full game aesthetic. And this is from my early days in gaming. This is like, you know, one of my favorite games of all time. It is my second favorite game ever, and that's Metal Gear Solid. The whole game is a snowy game. It takes place in Alaska, for anyone that's unfamiliar with Metal Gear Solid. That's like the whole game. It is perfect. And also, I should note this, winter is my favorite season. So I love the snow, I love all that. I just don't like being around other people that don't know how to drive magically in the snow. That's the only thing I don't like. And, you know, dirty snow is disgusting. Like, it's one thing when the ground is dirty, but when it's like dirt mixed with snow and it's just like, that it just looks like sludge, that I hate. But when it's nice and pretty and just, you know, white snow all over the place, it's cool, it's nice. And I prefer the cold to the heat. And Metal Gear is like the perfect snowy game. It's set in Alaska. You go up, you come out of some water, which clearly wasn't that cold, but you come out of the water, you go up the elevator, boom, footprints. You know, whose footprints are these? And then you can, like, that's like one of the most famous things in all of gaming, of course, because that hit during, you know, the PS1 era. And it's like, holy crap, you walk in the snow and it shows footprints. That's insane technology. And and they follow it perfectly, which was always one of my favorite things, because you could literally run in circles and they would go in the circle that you put it in. Like, they weren't like, I think they developed that over time. I think that was one of the funny things they did in later games. I think even in the remake with Twin Snakes, they did that, where if you do the circles and then you go off in a direction, it'll kind of automatically register that it's a circle, and then it'll just skip all of that and go forward. I could be wrong about that, but I'm sure it was in there somewhere where that ended up happening. And it was kind of like a joke in one of the early trailers where I was like, yeah, you can't just run in circles and do all the crazy stuff. They'll just figure out where you went, and then that's where they'll go. But I always love that, you know, in MGS1, that was always one of my favorite things to do because it's just fun. And it's, like I said, the whole game is a snowy game. It literally ends, depending on, you know, what ending you get. It's either Snake and Otacon or Snake and Meryl. And it ends with two characters riding off into the sunset, or I guess it technically would be the sunrise in that game, riding off into the sunrise on a snowmobile. What other games just randomly end where it's like, yep, we're on a snowmobile? And that's like, that's the majestic ending of the game. The sunrise on a snowmobile as you just drive out into, you know, I don't know, find like some Alaskan town, I guess. And it's like, that's awesome. So, of course, shout out to Metal Gear Solid because it is like the snowy game that comes to mind. Like, it's, the whole thing is snow. It's obviously not really wintry, it's just snow because it's Alaska, which is great. So, obviously, huge shout out to Metal Gear Solid. That's always one of the greats. And of course, going back to Shadow Moses and everything, going to the island and, you know, being there in MGS4 is always super cool too. So shout out to Metal Gear Solid because that was like the first thing I thought of. I was like, that whole game is just like the snowy game. I mean, straight up boss fights. You fight, you know, Raven in a tank. Boss fight. It's literally outside in the snow. When you fight them later, it's almost like you're in a refrigerator because it seems like there's no power. Like you can see characters breathing and stuff like that. Like through the whole game, that's like a big mechanic where you can see people's breath if you go in the first person. And it's like, that's actually kind of cool. So it's like just cold weather in general is like a huge mechanic of that game. And I always love that. So shout out to Metal Gear Solid for being like the ultimate snowy game. But something just to jump a couple of generations to something more modern, and this pops into my head because of the insane amount of times that I've seen it, is Astrobot. And the reason for that is because my daughter plays the crap out of Astrobot. She doesn't really play any of the snow levels, which is kind of funny, but you know, you see all the different worlds and they have like different snow levels. And oh, you know what? I just realized why this specific level connects to me so well. This is crazy. I did not think of this connection literally until I was just saying it. So for anyone who hasn't played Astrobot, one of the big things about that game is that it's kind of a representation of PlayStation history. So there are tons of different characters from multiple video games. So, you know, Metal Gear is in there. They have Resident Evil, Crash Bandicoot. Like Astrobot actually has a ridiculous amount. Even if you play the install game, Astro's Playroom, they had a lot in there. And then when they made like a full-on game for Astrobot itself, they put a ridiculous amount of characters. They even added characters through DLC where you could like do challenge levels and stuff, and then you unlock extra bots. And it's super great. You know, if you're interested, I highly recommend it. It won Game of the Year last year, and I think it's an amazing platformer. My daughter loves it, so it's like her first like legit game. So that's always going to be really cool. It's like, I think in total we have like over 100 hours in the game, and it's mostly because she likes to play it in the morning while I'm doing her hair. So it's funny to make this connection because the first level I think of is the first snow level in Astrobot. And in the very first snow level, and I didn't even make this connection when I was playing the game, I was just like, oh, more characters. It's Metal Gear characters. It was because it takes place in Alaska. I literally never made that connection until just now. But in the very first snow level of the Astrobot game, all the little bots that you end up saving and finding all over the level are all from Metal Gear Solid. And it's because it took place in a snowy level. So, you know, it's obviously a different aesthetic because that is obviously a kid's game when you're playing Astrobot. So the trees are like, it's made of ice cream and stuff. Like when you knock the snow off, or when you see the snow on the trees, it's like swirls of ice cream like you would get at Dairy Queen or something. And then when you hit the trees, all the leaves are sprinkles and stuff. So it's like ice cream mixed with snow and everything like that. So that's the aesthetic, is like, you know, snowy treats and stuff. So that's definitely like one of the levels that I think of for sure when it comes to that game. And then another one in that game that's like a snowy area. And then this goes into, you know, kind of leads into me talking about this actual game. Another level that they have is actually for God of War Ragnarok, which of course, if you played the first God of War, it's like, okay, it's like spring or whatever, and you go through, you going across the water and everything like that. And then the second game is like the winter game because it's Fimbulwinter, if I'm saying that correctly, which is like the long winter. So everything is snowy and ice and, you know, all the water's frozen over and stuff like that. So that whole game, once again, much like Metal Gear Solid, here you go. Like it's the ice snowy game, at least the main area. There are tons of, you know, different, you know, if you want to go biomes, you know, the classic term that everybody uses now. But that's definitely one of the main things, like the main hub area for the characters, where they live, and the open lake that was in the first game, now frozen over. You have that as like one of the big snowy areas. And that's super cool too, even though it's not the same as the original game where it's like, okay, you do this thing or that thing, and then the water level rises, and that's how you find more things. In this one, it's just frozen over, but I think it's based on I think it's just based on your abilities. It's been a minute since I played the game, but I know I went through like that whole area. But some stuff is like, okay, you can do this or you can do that. You might want to come back to this later. Some areas are just like, hey, here's just a super tough enemy. Maybe don't do that right now. So some of it is based on I have this ability, and some other things are just based on this enemy's really tough. Wait till you're better. So that main hub area of God of War Ragnarok is another one of my favorites. Of course, that's because I actually really love that game. So, you know, whether it's 2018 or Ragnarok, yeah, I love the whole God of War franchise, honestly. But that was kind of the big thing. Like, it is the long winter. So that's definitely an area that pops into my mind. Of course, you know, once again, a more modern thing, but that definitely pops into my head as like a more memorable snowy area. And I think what makes it so memorable is the fact that it's something, you know, that's always like a classic thing in gaming, or like, you know, in anything that actually does it, where it's like, here's this area, and then the next time you see it, it's like it's the same area, but it feels completely different. So of course it stands out. Like, we're running around, we got like 2 wolves, you know, on dog sleds and stuff like that. And it's like, this is super cool. Like, it just feels fun, and it's the same area, but it's so drastically different when it's frozen over and covered in snow that it's like, it really stands out as such a drastic change from, you know, God of War 2018. So definitely, of course, because I actually love the game in general, that tends to stick out to me. But another one, also, this is also on the PS5, because, you know, when I'm going off the top of my head, of course, I'm thinking more recent stuff, but Returnal has a really good ice area as well. That I recently put up my final run for Returnal, so if you haven't checked that out, definitely check that out. But I mentioned in that video, like, biomes, I think that's where that really came from, was Returnal. But one of the ones that they have, as you go through a portal, they have, you know, kind of the foresty areas where you start the game, then they have a desert area, then they have the wintry area, and they even have a straight up underwater area. But the wintry area is definitely cool. You know, of course, you go in and boom, it's snowing. And so everything's different. You get different enemies there as you go, and, you know, it's the 3rd level that you actually unlock. So when you first get there, it's like new stuff starts happening and it gets really intense. And I definitely died there quite a lot. If you haven't played Returnal, it's absolutely amazing. Buy Returnal, it's super cheap right now. And also Saros that's coming out is made by, you know, those are the Returnal people. So they made Saros as like the spiritual successor to Returnal. So check out Returnal, it's super cheap. I personally think it's amazing. You know, it's just how you feel about roguelikes and stuff like that. I think it's great. Confusing story. Basically doesn't even, like, I beat the game and I still had to go on YouTube because I was like, oh, I thought I was gonna get like definitive answers. I got nothing. I was confused and I was like, well, I loved it, but I'm gonna go on YouTube to figure this out because it didn't really make a lot of sense. But I love the game, so I highly recommend Returnal if you haven't played it yet. It's always that game that people reference where it's like, hey, I know in general, this console generation hasn't had like a buttload of exclusives and stuff, and that was kind of the big thing for PlayStation. But Returnal is one of those exclusives where it's like, you gotta pick that up. 100% you gotta pick it up, because that game's really, really good. So check out Returnal. Also another snowy level. Transitioning, you know, starting to go back a little bit more backwards in time. This PS4 era, so not too far back. But Horizon Zero Dawn has an entire DLC that is strictly just a snowy area. So that game, much like Returnal and, you know, tons of other games, you know, like I said, God of War, same thing, or specifically Ragnarok, where, you know, this area might be snowy, this area is like foresty, this area is the desert, stuff like that. Horizon Zero Dawn has that. And in the original, like, main story campaign, they have a snowy section, and it's like, okay, this is the snowy area of the game. It's a decent little chunk and everything. But they made a DLC, it's literally called The Frozen Wilds, and when you go there, the entire thing is just snow. Like, it's just snow, although there is a volcano, which is actually kind of cool, like just a pluming volcano, and everything else is snowy. It's actually kind of cool. But I always love that area. That DLC is actually really, really big. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is very extensive. Like, I didn't even play it until I got my PS5, and I was like, okay, I never played the DLC. Now I have to buy it before I start playing the second game. And it actually took me a minute. I was like, wow, it was a lot. It was an extensive DLC. If you like Horizon, I highly recommend that DLC. If you haven't gotten into it yet, it's really good DLC. You can even get it now. It'll look even better because you can get the PS5 version of the game, so it looks like Forbidden West, and those games look phenomenal. So that's a fantastic snowy area. Another one, and here we go. This is going like classic. Once again, going back all the way back to PS1. When it comes to snowy games and just being like, what's a snowy thing I think of? if I'm not thinking instantly Metal Gear Solid, the very next thing is specifically Crash Bandicoot 2. Crash Bandicoot 2 has, every time you get to different areas, well, I guess it depends which one you play, they're all different. But in the second game, you kind of go up and down the levels. I think in the third game, it was more like a hub thing and you just run around in a circle. But in the second game, you go up and down. So every time you go up and down, you get like, okay, once again, here's the jungle areas, here's this area, and then in 2, and I don't know why these stood out so much, but these are the ones I think of, and then if I'm not thinking that, I'm thinking Crash 3, and I'm thinking the medieval level, or of course, riding on the tiger and the motorcycle. But if we're going 2, I think the ice level is the most. Not sure why exactly, but those are the ones that always come to mind, is like that snowy set of areas, and you can like see the ice kind of peeking through, I guess, because you go through portals and stuff, so you can kind of see the ice sort of coming out of the portals. That always stands out to me. So there's multiple different levels of that, and like I said, I don't know why they really stick out, but when it comes to Crash Bandicoot 2 in particular, the ice levels, kind of that batch of ice levels, are the ones that stick out. And it might be because in 2, I think the ice levels are the only, or the snowy levels, I should say, I keep saying ice levels, but the snowy levels are the one where you get to ride the polar bear. And that, I'm pretty sure, the only levels where you can do that in the second game. And it's like, oh, this is really different from, every other level where you're just running around. And then 3 came out, and that's when it was like, hey, here's a motorcycle level, you can ride on the tiger. So it was definitely different in 3. They added more of those levels where you're using, machines and stuff, like the underwater level where he has like the little jet booster thing and it can shoot torpedoes and stuff. Crash Warped had a lot of those different levels. Like there was way more variety. And I feel like in 2, they had that small batch of the snowy levels, and in like one, and it was like one section of one of those levels. If I'm not mistaken, it's been a million years since I played the Crash games, although I do really want to get that giant bundle they have on PSN where it's like the 3 remakes and the 4th game, and it has Crash Team Racing remake as well. So at some point I'm gonna get that, because those go on sale for an insane amount, because it's like over $100, and I've seen that junk go on sale and it'll be like $32 or something crazy, and I'm like, I should really get that. But the backlog right now, I'm like, I'll get that eventually, and I'll have a great time with that. But I always think of those snowy levels whenever I think of Crash Bandicoot, specifically if I think of 2. If I think of Crash, I'll be honest, I instantly go straight for the motorcycle. I love the motorcycle level and Coco's level where you're riding the tiger. Those are like the 2 most replayed levels ever for me when it comes to Crash, as in general, but especially Crash 3. Those are the levels I think of the most. And also the underwater level. And I think that's because that was a demo level. I know I'm doing my tangents, but that's what happens on this series. But I think the underwater level in Crash 3 is the level I have a huge memory of, because before I got the game, that's the level you get to play in the Crash 3 demo. It's the underwater level. And it might be another regular level as well, but I feel like it was specifically the underwater level. But Crash 2, I think of the snowy stuff, riding on the polar bear, things like that. Maybe that was even in Crash 3 and I'm just blending my games together. I know there's a bunch of snowy levels, so maybe the actual polar bear riding was in 3, but I believe it's in 2. Obviously, this is going off of nearly 30 years ago, being the last time I played Crash 2. So, take it or leave it. That's kind of how it is. But there's a snowy level where you ride a polar bear. So if it's in 3, then it's in 3. But Crash Bandicoot, 100% is what I think of when I think of like a good snowy level. Crash Bandicoot is definitely one of those sections. And of course, if we're going Crash, I do have to give a shout out to Mario. I didn't have Mario 64, but I played it. Of course, at the time, I don't think we were, going real crazy when it came to like tossing the baby penguin off. That's become, that's like a more modern thing that we did, which is still funny. But that definitely wasn't as much of a thing back in the day where it was like everybody threw that thing. I was like, after all the time I spent getting up there, I'm not throwing that effing penguin anywhere. But I never really did that as a kid, but I just had to shout that out because it's just one of those random things that's like, it's just worth talking about. It's like, I didn't have it personally, but of course, you kind of have to reference it. There are some things that are out there where it comes to snowy areas in games and like the ice levels and stuff like that, where you just kind of have to give it its recognition. But that is actually where I'm gonna end things. I actually made it home, smooth, nobody's been on the roads. So I'm gonna go ahead and end it there. And I think I covered the gambit for the ones that really stick out to me. I think when it comes to the PS2 era, 360 range, it's like, there's not much that really sticks out to me when it comes to snowy areas or levels. I can say Resistance 1 does have a snowy portion, and it probably is a fairly big level. because it's, you know, it's a shooter game. Those levels do tend to last long, but you know, it doesn't really stand out as much. It was just like, you know, it was wintry and snowy, and that was just about it. So that's all I really have for that. I'm like, it was definitely snowing in that first game. Like when you start the game, I'm pretty sure it's a snowy area. But other than that, I don't really have much when it comes to, like I said, just specifically that era. That's why I was like PS1 and then like most recent stuff, everything in between. I'm like, I'm trying to think of something. I got it. 360 era, PS3, Dead Space 3. Oh, Lost Planet. Yeah, because of course, you know, that was the big thing when 3 came out. Everybody was like, hey, Lost Planet. So shout out to Lost Planet. Haven't played that in a billion years, but I did love those games. Those are really good games. And of course, Dead Space 3. I love Dead Space as a franchise. Obviously, Dead Space 3 is Dead Space 3, but I still had some fun with it. And the DLC for that is phenomenal. That's what the whole game should have been. But we don't have to get into that. I always end up getting some way, somehow, I end up referencing how I hate EA for what they did in killing Dead Space twice. And I still hate them for that. But I do have to give, you know, representation to both Lost Planet as well as specifically Dead Space 3. So there we go. Just to throw those couple extra games in, just to get that specific era in, because I'm sure there's tons of other snowy things that I'm not thinking of, and games I probably didn't play, or they just didn't stand out to me when it comes to, you know, most memorable snowy areas in games. So like I said in the beginning of this though, I would love to know your thoughts. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite or most memorable snowy areas in games, or just, like I said, snowy games. Like Lost Planet is a snowy game. Dead Space is a snowy game. Going back to the classic MGS1, snowy game. Also, shout out to Resident Evil Revelations. I was just trying to randomly think, like, there's a snowy thing in Resident Evil somewhere. I just wanted to talk about Resident Evil. Resident Evil Revelations 1 has a snowy, wintry area. And I'm sure there are other Resident Evil games that I'm just, RE6 has one as well. That's like one of the worst ones though. That's like having to go like all up around this cabin and stuff. That I remember when I first played that, I didn't like that. I don't hate on 6 like a lot of people do, but that specific snowy portion, I was like, I don't like that. This is a dumb level. But anyway, we'd love to know your thoughts. So like I said, please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.